During the Jurassic Period, our planet's oceans were teeming with incredible prehistoric life. Some of these Jurassic marine creatures grew to enormous sizes and would have been terrifying predators to encounter, and their fossilized remains inspire curiosity and fascination among all those who witness them today, millions of years after they lived. Recently, the BoneHeads crew and I were invited to give a talk about these wonderful marine predators at a science festival near Oxford in the UK, since all three of us are currently researching marine reptiles for our master's degrees. You may have seen our talk at the same science festival from last year, but don't worry, this year's talk was different, as I was able to give updates on the progress of my research on Ichthyosaurs, including the ichthyosaur specimen that's housed in the museum where we gave the talk, and Eddie was able to speak about his current work on revising the size estimates for Pleurodon and other pliosaurs. We gave this talk in the town of Abingdon, and we focused on the ichthyosaurs, pliosaurs, and marine crocodylomorphs that lived towards the end of the Jurassic period and that have been found in a geological formation called the Kimmeridge Clay, since this formation runs right beneath Abingdon, and so we were literally standing on top of it while speaking. We presented to a live audience and also recorded the event for everyone here on YouTube to see, so I hope you enjoy it. Thank you everyone for coming. This is our talk about the prehistoric marine monsters of Abingdon. So we're going to be talking to you about a few different kinds of marine reptiles that can be found in the local area and in the geological formation that's under our feet right now. We are the Boneheads, we like to call ourselves. So I run this YouTube channel where I make paleontological content. And as part of that, one of the shows we do is the Boneheads, which is sort of like a podcast style with the three of us. So we're all Emira's students at University of Portsmouth, and I'm working on Ichthyosaurs.
Yeah, don't worry, I did survive being eaten by a pliosaur. Yeah, so I'm currently doing one on the size of Pleurodon. And Hamza?
Yeah, I study marine crocodiles, but they're actually not from the UK. I study ones from Morocco, so completely different new area.
So these are the kinds of organisms that we're talking about. This is an example of an ichthyosaur, quite a large predatory one called Thalattosuchians, found in Lyme Regis and places like that. You've got the Plesiosaurs, the long-necked ones, and the Pliosaurs, the short-necked, big-headed ones.
Yeah, like Pleurodon, which is what I'm currently working on.
Yeah. And also, weirdly enough, the marine crocodylomorphs, which is what we do.
They are the weird group that we will talk about later. They're actually the first marine crocodiles to actually go into the water before them. So we'll explore the group more later.
So we're talking about the Kimmeridge Clay Formation, which is about 150 million years old. You can see there where it places. So towards the late Jurassic. This is a map of its extent throughout the UK. So the darker purple is where it's outcropping on the surface, and the lighter purple is where the subcrop is, so underneath the surface. This is what it's named after, the town of Kimmeridge in Dorset. That's the type section. And as you can see, it goes in like this big seam all up through Abingdon, up into Yorkshire, and also outcrops on the Isle of Skye. And it's also an important oil source rock out in the North Sea. And then there's a bit of a closer up view of Abingdon. So the Kimmeridge Clay is in the orange. And as you can see, it's right underneath us, everywhere around here. And there's a few nice kind of exposures when they dig down into pits to just the south of Abingdon. And quite a few pretty amazing fossils have been found there, including the Abingdon ichthyosaur, which is in this museum and is what I'll be talking about. So this is the planet approximately at the time in the Kimmeridgian. So yeah, it would have been a fairly shallow sea kind of environment filled with all sorts of amazing marine reptiles, such as the ichthyosaurs, which you may be familiar with as sort of the dolphins of the Mesozoic seas. So they're very well known as being very convergent with modern-day cetaceans, whales, and dolphins. And there's this nice graph that shows all of the various things, how because they've adapted to the same marine environment, they've ended up looking very similar in their overall body plan, which is an amazing example of this convergent evolution. They appeared at the very start of the Triassic period, so about 250 million years ago, but they probably derived from a group that was around even older than that in the Permian period. And they lived until the start of the late Cretaceous, so 90 million years ago. Didn't quite make it to the end of the Cretaceous when all the dinosaurs died out. That was about 66 million years ago. They actually died out a little bit sooner, and the exact reasons for that is a bit of a mystery. That's something that people are working on. So, do they all look like dolphins? No, they don't. They're actually quite diverse. So this is kind of a thing that I like to say when people think of ichthyosaurs, if they know what they are, they usually think of the very dolphin-like forms, but they're really quite diverse. You've got Durophagus forms, so these were adapted to crunching down on really hard prey. So this is Omphallosaurus. You've got some of the first ocean giants that ever existed were ichthyosaurs. This is Symbospondylus youngorum, and this was a massive predator in the very, very earliest Triassic seas, right after this massive mass extinction. These things appeared and were like the top predators of their time. And then a little bit later, you get some of potentially the biggest animals that ever lived. These are pretty big anyway, but some of these types of ichthyosaurs may have got to the size of blue whales back in the Triassic, so they could have actually been even bigger than blue whales, potentially. Then you've got a few more weird ones. This is a nice one, Uranosaurus. So you find this in the UK and also in Germany, and it's got this really weird, massive overbite. There's a nice model of one there. So almost like a swordfish shape in a way, but all the teeth still run along the top jaw, so they're not really sure what they were kind of using them for. Lots of huge top predators. This is Temnodontosaurus. This is a Temnodontosaurus here. And these were the top predators of their time before the Pliosaurs and before the Mosasaurs evolved. These were top of the food chain in the oceans. And then some nice, quite small, cute species. So Horpheopteryx, it's a really small one, massive eyes. I think they're quite cute. So what's in the Kimmeridge clay in terms of ichthyosaurs? Currently, there's about 5 valid genera. There's definitely more out there, especially in the Etches collection in the town of Kimmeridge. There's definitely a few more specimens in there that are probably new species. So this is one that was named from there quite recently, 2020, I think it was, 2021, Thalassodraco etchesi. We also got Brachypterygius extremus, which is so far only known from this one paddle, but there is some more material being described. Grandelius mordax, so this is what the Abingdon ichthyosaur is, but this is a different, a skull of a different animal. The Nanopterygius as well, and possibly Ophthalmosaurus, although Eddie has doubts about that. So yeah, the Abingdon ichthyosaur. So this is up in the Attic Gallery in this museum, and I've been studying this thing for the last year and a half now, about. So it was the focus of my undergraduate dissertation project, because no one's like properly described this thing before. And so my supervisors, Dave Martill and Meg Jacobs, they went to see this thing, and they ended up getting distracted by the pliosaur, which Eddie will talk about later. But they put me on working on it, and so it was discovered in the 1980s, and it's been on display for a long time, and no one's really looked at it. This is a map of how it was found. So there's this nice compilation of photos and then a sketch that the discoverer made, and then I kind of mapped out which bones were which, and I could tell that it probably died on its back because the left and right forefins are flipped. And yeah, that's as it is in the gallery. So it kind of looks like a bit of an exploded skull because it's kind of all over the place. You've got quite clearly the vertebral column, the forefins, and then these are the upper jaws, the lower jaws, and then all sorts of bits of skull in there. Ichthyosaurs are kind of weird because all the skull pieces overlap a lot, so it's very confusing to kind of tell which bone is which because there's a lot of overlapping. But we've almost worked out what everything is, just about. Yeah, so there's a bit of the pectoral girdle, so the coracoid and the scapula, and then, yeah, vertebrae, ribs, and the atlas axis complex, which is the first 2 vertebrae fused together, so that's a very useful one to have. And this just shows approximately how much of the animal there is. We do actually now know we've got the maxilla as well, so that's in there. But yeah, that's about how complete this specimen is, and this is what it would have looked like. And this is also possibly what it would have looked like with its skin on its bones, the Abingdon ichthyosaur in life. So this was probably like a mesopredator. So I don't know how long the specimen itself is. The skull is 1.2 meters long, so it's a fairly big animal, but not quite as big as some of the pliosaurs that are around. But could have taken out a marine croc, maybe. But the really interesting thing about this specimen, and what was another focus of my dissertation, was the fact that it is absolutely riddled with bite marks. So this animal was attacked by something, but then there's a lot of evidence of extensive healing. So it survived the attack and then, yeah, preserved as this amazing fossil with all of these bite marks. And these are some of the worst bite marks I've seen in an ichthyosaur and in any, well, yeah, in a lot of prehistoric animals, they are really, really severe. So I think, yeah, this one especially, this is a massive gouge that's come out. I've got some better images of that later. But you can see this woven bone texture, it's called. It's this very distinctive kind of bone that's indicative of very rapid deposition. So it occurs during healing as the tissue is repairing. So we can tell like all of these areas are affected. And yeah, you can just see where it's kind of been scraped out. A few more close-ups, some interesting parts. So yeah, as well as all of the gouges and everything and the woven bone, there's what look like traces of blood vessels all across the snout. And so what I think was possibly happening here is during the process of healing, lots of new blood vessels are formed, like to supply the tissues and everything. And there was also deposition of new bones as the calluses were forming and everything. So I think they've probably like grown up into the new blood vessels or existing blood vessels and caused like this impression on the bone, because there's all of these amazing branching structures. This is what the snout looks like when they're placed together. You can see, so that's the left and the right upper jaw, and you can see the bite marks like going across like this from one bone to the other. They are really amazing. And then this is also really interesting because, so this is the tooth groove here. And ichthyosaurs are weird because they don't have tooth sockets. They're all placed just in a groove along the jaws. But this part here looks like it's eroded inwards. This is all like where it's been prepared, but this is definitely like a change in the bone tissue type. So it's possible that it got some kind of bacterial infection in its tooth groove, possibly related to the bite mark and the attack, or that might have just made things worse for it. But it looks like it's the bone has been eroded by bacteria, so that's quite an interesting injury there as well. And then, yeah, just a few more of the bite marks. This one is the most noticeable and severe one, just this massive gouge. And then, yeah, a few of the other things you can see there. As part of my project, some of my supervisors at the university came up and did a 3D surface scan of the jaws themselves. So it's really nice. You can see all of the detail of the bite marks and all of those blood vessel traces. And I just mapped out where kind of they all are. And so these are like 3D movable digital images that I can use to kind of measure everything, and then just marked on the bacterial infection there. So you can see the tooth groove here. All of the teeth will be sitting in this, and then it's definitely eroded there a bit, and that's just a big crack where it's been preserved like that. And then also some bite marks or grazes on the nasal on the other side of it. So what happened to it? What attacked it? We can't say for certain because that's very speculative. But measuring the distances between like several of the bite marks that are all in parallel series with each other, I found that it's the spacing between them is a lot greater than the average tooth spacing of Grandulius mordax, which is the name of this species of ichthyosaur. So it probably wasn't attacked by a member of its own species, and instead it's probably an example of a failed predation attempt. So again, what that predator was, you can't really say, but it is consistent with the tooth spacing of Pliosaurs and Thalattosuchians, the marine crocs, that are in the same formation. So something possibly like this came along and took a big chunk out of its jaw. But yeah, its death wasn't the end, obviously, as I'm now studying it. But as it was being buried, there's some interesting examples of how its carcass formed a source of food and also a home for bivalves. So this is one of the jaws, and you can see here's a trace of one, and this is a bit of a shell that's encrusted onto it. And also one of the vertebrae, there's a really nice bivalve on it there. So this is my very scientific drawing of exactly what happened. I'm not an artist, as you can tell. But it would have died on its back, sunk down, and then been exposed for a little bit, some of the bones on the surface. So it's like how you see in modern day whale falls. When a whale dies, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean. It forms like this island of nutrition and everything for all of the animals in that really, in that environment. And so been scavenged, and loads of things growing on it. Loads of bivalves clearly were growing on it. And here you can see all of these tiny scratches on the bones. There's loads of them. And these don't show any evidence of healing, so these would have happened after it had died. And so that's all scavenging marks, so clearly it was exposed for a bit. And you can even see, I don't know if you can see from there, but there's these kind of meandering traces going through. and I think that might be like an echinoderm or something going up along it and kind of feeding on the soft tissues. So yeah, really interesting evidence of what happened to it. So I'm still researching the Abingdon ichthyosaur. There's a few plans for what's going to happen with it. The main thing is that it's going to be used along with a bunch of other specimens of Grandelius, the ichthyosaur, to kind of do a big revision of the genus, and it's going to be kind of compared to these other specimens. So that's going to be really exciting. I'm also working on a paper and also giving a presentation at a conference about the pathologies, so all of the injuries, because I mean that's just amazing. It's too good to not kind of publish anything about these spectacular injuries on it, so that's going to be exciting. And it's also being used as part of my current MRes project. So I'm looking at evidence of deep diving behavior in ichthyosaurs. And so for a part of that, I've actually managed to thin section one of the ribs of the Abingdon ichthyosaur. So that is the thin section there. I've got some better images on the next slide. So yeah, I'm just taking these thin sections, and you can see all of these gaps. These are where the blood vessels and nerves would go through the bone. And so for part of my research, I'm kind of measuring all the diameters of those and comparing them to other ichthyosaur samples to see if there's a difference in the size, if they're a deep diver or a shallow diver. So yeah, it's really exciting, and thank you to the museum for letting me cut up their ichthyosaur. But what other marine monsters were there in Abingdon? Eddie, you're going to take over now.
Thank you. So we're now going to talk about pliosaurs. So pliosaurs are related to plesiosaurs, the long-necked ones with 4 flippers, and there's always a weird one within the group who decides to do the opposite. So instead, they've got these huge heads, short necks, and then these quite rotund bodies, and they've got these 4 flippers. This is a specimen of Pleurodon over in Tübingen, Germany, which I had the pleasure of seeing. That's sort of what they'd look like in life, and they're quite menacing. Those huge heads could swallow anything. And yeah, as I've named it, a head with 4 engines, because those 4 flippers would drive them through the water. Yeah, so their type of locomotion is rather different from anything living today, even turtles, which have their 4 flippers. Exactly how they were swimming through water is a bit unknown, but there's a guy over in Imperial College London who's built a robot, so we'll see what that turns up. And they were really successful, actually. So this sort of shows the whole of plesiosaur the group. So the long neck ones, the short neck ones, and pliosaurs sort of fall within this circle here. So they appear sort of around the end of the Triassic, beginning of the Jurassic. You can actually find one of the earliest ones down in Lyme Regis, and they sort of go extinct around the same time as the ichthyosaurs. So there must have been some sort of major change in the Earth then that was affecting these groups. So we have here a picture of Thalattosuchians Hawkins eye, which is the earliest pliosaur. And to be honest, if you look at it, it looks just like a plesiosaur. Long neck, tiny head, nothing special really. But then by the time you get to about 90-ish million years ago, you get Megacephalosaurus from America, the last one we know of, and it looks rather different. It's got that huge head, that tiny neck, and a really large body. Of course, we're at Abingdon, so we're going to be talking about the pliosaurs from the Kimmeridgian, so that late Jurassic period. This is sort of when pliosaurs are at their apex, their biggest, their best, and their coolest. And here's a fun little picture of Thalattosuchians I found online of it on a skateboard. So Ben showed an image of the world during the Kimmeridgian earlier, and there's some stars here that just sort of show where you can find pliosaurs during this time. So you've got them over in England where we are, but then you've also gone really up north, it's sort of in the Arctic, but also coming over to South America and that side of the world. So we had a really broad geographic range. And in the UK, we have 4 species of Kimmeridge clade pliosaurs. So this is sort of their order in which they're found in time-wise. So we start with Brachydeurus, the very first actually described by Richard Owen in 1840, something like that. Then we get Kevini, Carpenteri, Westbury-ensis. They're not the easiest names to say, but that's what we've got. And here's a lovely skeletal of what they sort of looked like during that time. So yeah, once again, huge heads, short necks, and those 4 flippers. And we have a skull here of Pliosaurus kevini over in Dorchester Museum. It's about 2 meters long. It's really nice mounted believe it was sort of put on display about 2013, so it's quite a recent discovery. So there's definitely more to be found. And yeah, once again, I've gone around and seen lots of these pliosaurs. Yeah, they have these huge teeth. So during the Kimmeridge, what were these pliosaurs eating? Well, they were the apex predators. So Ben mentioned the ichthyosaurs were sort of that middle ground. Well, these were eating the ichthyosaurs. So we have this jaw here from Oxford Museum. If you've ever gone to see that, it's about 3 meters long. Potentially, it might parts of it might be reconstructed, but we'll see. And that's a picture of a Pliosaurus from the recent Attenborough documentary, if you saw that on New Year's Day. But they have these really special teeth, so they're huge, and they've got these rather large ridges on the side of the teeth, and these help pierce and sort of cut flesh. This is a tooth of Liopleurodon, which I took from the university as a cast. And actually, the Kimmeridge teeth do differ a bit from this. They're triangular in shape, which helps even more in piercing the flesh. But you can see they are rather large, and there are some I've seen in London Museum, which are as big as my arm, including the root. Yeah, and they were eating pretty much everything. The ichthyosaurs and over here, spit calf. But we have a poor picture of a plesiosaur from Australia, which has some bite marks here and here. And unlike Ben's ichthyosaur, it did not live. This was sort of see, it was bitten from the underside, and the skull was crushed. So we think that they were hunting from below, maybe like sharks of today. Yeah, they're eating ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, pretty much everything because they could swallow everything. And yeah, actually, pliosaur news has been pretty good lately. The last year we've had loads of new discoveries. So we sort of start with the Abingdon pliosaur. So there's some artwork by Meg Jacobs, a colleague at University of Portsmouth. Them and Dave Martill and Roy Smith, they described the vertebrae which are now on display upstairs and sort of calculated how big a pliosaur it would actually be, and it was rather enormous. And we have the Etches pliosaur, which was discovered summer last year, I think, but it was put on display this year over in the Etches collection. It's closed at the moment, but if you do get the chance to go see it, I recommend this fantastic specimen. Got the jaws locked together, really well preserved, and there may be more of a skeleton coming out of the cliff if they can manage. But we also have Lorrainosaurus. I put this one in because also a recent bit of news, but actually there's a subgroup within pliosaurs, the really large ones, the really scary looking ones, and the discovery of this was much earlier than any other of the really large pliosaurs and pushes back their sort of range by quite a few million years, making them the longest surviving clade of macropredatory marine reptile ever. So they're a really successful group. This body plan did really well. There's even some weird plesiosaurs that look a lot like them later on. But yeah, how do we work out the size of these pliosaurs? Because there's nothing like them today. You can't like with dinosaurs, you can look at a chicken, or ichthyosaurs, you can kind of look at dolphins, maybe crocodiles with you. Nothing like a pliosaur today. So we really are only basing it off the fossils. And if you've ever seen Walking with Dinosaurs, you might remember it was said to be 25 meters. So we're not so sure about that now. And I'll just include a couple statements from I found on BBC website about these recent news articles. So Abingdon pliosaur said to be up to 14.4 meters, Etches pliosaur up to 12. So very impressive lengths. But yeah, how do we get that? Like, are we just pulling it out of nowhere, thin air? Well, no, we are actually looking at fossils and doing some real science with it. So here we have a little figure from my supervisor's paper on the Abingdon pliosaur, although slightly modified, and it just shows some of the taxa we do actually have complete skeletons for, because unfortunately Kimmeridge clay pliosaurus itself we don't have a complete skeleton of at the moment. Got lots of really great preserved skulls, not so much of the rest of the body, but they're very similar to all their other relatives. So by looking at the proportions of their relatives, we can hopefully get a range of estimates. So with Pliosaurus and Liopleurodon from the Oxford clay, a bit earlier in time, but still very similar. Sachicosaurus and Stenorhynchosaurus from the Cretaceous. Pliosaurus and Stenorhynchus are slightly smaller pliosaurs with longer, thinner snouts, whereas Liopleurodon and Sachicosaurus have really robust, huge skulls, definitely large predators. And this one's been a bit modified by me because my current research is on the size of Pleurodon, so I sort of squashed that in. So using those proportions, we can look at the Abingdon vertebrae, and this is how they're displayed upstairs. Recommend going up, seeing that afterwards. They are huge. They're like dinner plates. And the figure over here from the paper describing them, and these lovely surface scans, like what Ben did with the Ichthyosaur, because I'm sure they went along, scanned the Ichthyosaur and thought, oh, these are cool. Scanned these as well, done by Roy Smith. And over here, so we have in red pointing out where the ribs attached on, because it's quite important. Because yeah, we've got these vertebrae, but how do we know they're pliosaur, and how do we know they're from the neck? All this information, we've got to work this out. So let's go through. Well, we've got yeah, are you sure it isn't a sauropod? Got a range of different animals living in the Kimmeridge. So how do we know it's a pliosaur? Well, let's start with ichthyosaurs. So this is what ichthyosaur vertebrae roughly looks like. They do vary a bit, but they're very, very concave, really pinched in the middle, and their cross section is very like hourglass shaped. And in terms of rib facets, they can have single or double, but they're always separated, unlike in the Abingdon pliosaur. So if you go upstairs, you'll see that the rib attachments they're joined together in like a figure of 8. So it's not Ichthyosaurus, so we can rule that out. Now we can look next at the crocodiles, the marine crocodiles. Now in terms of their length to width and height ratio, they're a lot longer than pliosaur vertebrae, and these Abingdon ones are very, very short. So it can't be a crocodile. And after talking with a local collector yesterday, actually in Abingdon, these marine crocodiles are really rare, especially compared to the ones found in Kimmeridge Bay. They're a lot more abundant there, so very unlikely that it's crocodile. Now sauropod, that's a bit out there. You think, oh, sauropod, pliosaur, very different animals, but unfortunately, sauropods decided to make it a bit tricky, and their vertebrae differ a lot through the backbone, and those first 3 in the tail look a lot like a pliosaurs. They're short, they're taller than they are long, and sometimes they have those double rib facets along here, just like a pliosaur. It's not this picture I have here. The one good difference to see though is they have these extra rib attachments at the very bottom for all of the tail ribs you get at the very bottom of the tail. So, and the Abingdon pliosaur luckily does not have them, so we can rule out sauropods as well. So now we've got all that information. What my supervisor did is measured the length of these vertebrae, and using the proportions I showed before, we can actually estimate the length of the neck and then scale that up to the whole proportions of the body. And this is something I mocked up a little bit earlier, and that sort of shows you the size range of these pliosaurs, because this Abingdon pliosaur is probably one of the biggest we've ever found. So the lower range, 9.8 meters, which is absolutely enormous. We've got a 1.65 meter human here for scale, swimming alongside. But the upper range is about 12.5 meters based on that Cretaceous pliosaur, Sachicosaurus. Pelenustes and Pleurodon estimates sort of fall into the middle. Yeah, the 14.4 estimate, my current research has sort of decreased that a bit, but not enough to downsize it enough. I mean, it's still very impressive, and you can see these were huge predators with these huge skulls. Probably would have been like over 2 meters long skull, so they would have been able to pretty much swallow anything, and would have been rather fascinating beasts. Shame we don't have them around today. But yeah, I think it's Hamza's time to talk about these marine crocodiles, which are rather different from today's crocodiles.
Yes. So, hi, I'll take over and talk about the marine crocodiles of the Kimmeridge Clay. So, the marine crocodiles, we call them the Thalattosuchians, and I'm going to show you the 2 groups. So, Thalattosuchians, they go back into the beginning of the Jurassic, so we have evidence of Thalattosuchians right at the base, but we have some idea that they actually might push even further back into the Triassic. So for now, they somewhat predate the Pliosaurs. They're almost around the same time as the Ichthyosaurs. But within the Thalattosuchians, there's 2 groups. You have Telosauroidea and you have Metriincoidea. And what I'm going to show you today are Metriincoidea. These are the absolute weirdest crocodiles you'll ever find. From that photo, you'll be like, oh, the head looks like a crocodile. But when you go further back, you're like, hang on, you've got paddles. You don't have your individual fingers, webbed fingers. You've got a shark-like tail. So I'll introduce you to those. I currently work on Teleosauroidea, so I work on ones from Morocco, but I'll introduce you to the weird and wonderful Metriincoidea. So what makes a marine crocodile? So just looking on this skeleton, you think just a normal basic crocodile, a gharial-like animal. So what's amazing is they have an incredibly massive hind limbs compared to forelimbs. They have a streamlined body and they have a really long, powerful tail. So this is the powerhouse of the crocodile. They will use their tails and legs to propel through the water, and their skulls are adapted to having these big openings compared to the eyes. They have these big openings where a powerful muscle will go through and they can just snap. They've got a really weak ball joint as well in the skull, so they can snap in the water to get prey. So we think these animals are mostly eating fish when they look like a gharial. But I will introduce you to the weird crocodiles, Metriincoidea. So, the Metriinkids. Just by looking at that, you think that's not a crocodile. That's an actual monster. So I would like to say first, in the Kimmeridge clay, Teleosauroidea is incredibly rare. We only have probably a couple of bones. We probably only have like one. We have one confirmed Teleosauroid from the Kimmeridge. It's called Bathysuchus megarhinus. But for some reason, in the Kimmeridge clay, the diversity of these Metriinkids just boom. We have so many Metriinkids for some reason. But just by looking at this animal here, we could say it looks like you've got this ichthyosaur tail, you've got these paddles that look similar to an ichthyosaur, then you've got this pliosaur-like skull. So I'll show you what Metriinkidae are. So this is Sicarosaurus. Sicarosaurus is a weird animal. You've got like an ichthyosaur skull. You've got this weird paddle. Instead of crocodiles, they'll have webbed fingers so they can push through water, like ducks. You've got this hypercera tail. This would be similar to dolphins and sharks would have. But what's amazing is crocodiles today have osteoderms, so they're the armor plates. And for some reason, Metriinkidae lost them. Now, we think Metriinkidae lost them because they're shedding weight, so they can go in the water faster, they're quicker. So compared to their cousins Teleosauroidea, they still have their osteoderms. So we still think Teleosauroidea could come onto land, probably protect itself, but Metriincoidea have these paddles, so we can't imagine them pushing themselves onto land to lay eggs like Teleosauroidea can. But we do have examples of Sicarosaurus giving live birth. These are the first crocodiles, and we think these are the only crocodiles in existence to actually give live birth in the water instead of coming onto land and laying eggs. We really don't know what happened in evolution for them to do this, but this just shows how weird and wonderful they really are. I'll let you have a guess here. Which one is the crocodile? What do you think is the crocodile of all these? You go for the bottom one. So, funny enough, as I said earlier, that is actually the crocodile. They look identical to ichthyosaurs. So, you can see how similar. They've got this massive sclerotic ring in the eyes. This one, it's there. The face looks so similar. So, you can see these animals were doing some completely weird to the other crocodiles. So, first we have Metriorhynchus, discovered by Christian von Meyer, a German paleontologist. But one thing that was amazing was when von Meyer found Metriorhynchus, he looked at the skull and thought, this is not a crocodile. This is something really, really bizarre. This is something weird. But then when you look closer at the body of the animal, when you actually look closer, you're like, hang on. This might actually look like a crocodile. This is something weird. For some reason, they have really big craniums. They have massive craniums in front of the eyes. We don't know why, but they have reduced pittings in their skull. And we think that Metriorhynchids could have a bigger bite force than Teleosauroidea. We still don't know the placement. So a recent paper has come out and we still don't know the placement where these marine crocodiles come from. We keep arguing back and forth where they go. So there is Plesiosuchus. So when they first found Plesiosuchus, they originally thought it was a pliosaur. This shows that Metriorhynchids just like to copy other animals for some reason. We originally thought that they were filling in some sort of niche. So we had the pliosaurs, which were the top apex predators of the ichthyosaurs. But then we think that the Metriorhynchids were in between the ichthyosaurs and pliosaurs. So they were quite dangerous animals, but they're filling in some sort of niche in the waters. We don't know truly why. then I'll introduce you to Thalattosuchians. So from now we can see that they're copying a similar trend. They look almost identical to one another, but small little features will allow them to diversify. About 4.7 meters. But yeah, so these are, what's interesting is Metriorhynchids are hypercarnivores. So as Thalattosuchians, you'll see later, there's a crocodile called Dacosaurus. Dacosaurus was completely, really bizarre animal. First we'll go to Sicarosaurus. So this is the specimen that they found that the animal may have given live birth. They found that there's weird complexity within the pelvis, and later we found the little baby right next to the adult. But what's interesting is Sicarosaurus may have had, when the babies were born, we've noticed that they've got really tiny paddles at the front. So we think the paddles may have developed later in stage. So they may be using the back legs and the streamlined tail to push through the water, and then later using their paddles to direct themselves around. So they weren't fully developed yet. And now we have the weirdest Metriorhynchid out of all of them. This is Dacosaurus. Truly looks like a pliosaur with these massive teeth. When they first found it, you can imagine how confusing this thing looked. You've got this weird seal-like paddles, you've got a shark tail, you've got this weird pliosaur skull. So these would have been the around their ecology, one of the top apex predators. We do have evidence now of Metriorhynchids eating a fish about 16 meters long. We have the stomach content, and they found the fin rays of the fish and in the stomach, and they think that this animal may have predated on a dead 60-meter fish, or probably, if it was, if it wanted to, it would probably attack it as well. So we're still working on it. We don't know fully what's happened in that scenario. We think they may have had a killer whale ecology, so coming from underneath, going for certain organs, but truly from this animal you can tell it is weird. Here you have a modern-day crocodile, so that is Crocodylus niloticus, the Nile crocodile, and that's Dacosaurus' skull. Just from those two alone, you can be like, this is not a, this is something, this is a monster compared to one of the most ferocious animals today. What's amazing is this is the tooth of Crocodylus niloticus. You can see that it's quite blunted at the top. It's got this big root, whereas Dacosaurus actually has these weird cutting edges on both sides. And as Eddie said earlier, with the pliosaur teeth, we think that these are ripping flesh off the animals instead of crunching down. So you can imagine a group of these herding a big animal, attacking it. Here are some examples of some Dacosaurus. So we have Dacosaurus length. Dacosaurus is quite big, a Metriorhynchid. Some artificial construction of Dacosaurus, but you can see it's got this really tiny paddle, just these weird bodies, streamlined bodies, and just a pliosaur skull. It's insane what Dacosaurus was doing in the water, but this is what we have of the Metriorhynchids in the Kimmeridge clay. We're hopefully still finding more. We do know there are more to come, and we hopefully hope to find more Teleosaurs. So, thank you for listening, and any questions?
Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed our talk. I'd like to think that we improved a bit in our presentation skills from last year, which was our first real time giving a talk in front of a live audience, and I hope you liked hearing about all the updates on the Abingdon Ichthyosaur. It's been a really fun and interesting project to work on. Anyway, let us know what you thought in the comments below, and please feel free to share your ideas for topics we should cover in future.